Whenever you are, how many more people do we have in recording?
Well,
Here they come.
yep. Oh. Reese Honeycutt, wait till you see how many things I'm going to do this morning to show off.
I can't wait, Amy.
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
Just a moment. Are you
Okay.
ready? Is everybody ready for the dance party? I love it when it's the first people who it's their first time here.
They're like, who are these people? Is this a cult?
What do you mean?
Yes.
You know, I look at other people who have like these nice programs and it's seamless and so polished and I'm like, what is wrong with us? What?
Oh no, this is perfect. This is the way
Okay.
it should be.
Oh, get ready because on Tuesday I'm going to send out a survey to all of you to see what
And
you like about Feedback Friday.
today we're going to have everybody look under their chair for a special gift.
There's a car under your chair right now. We've delivered it to your houses. And some red lipstick. Okay. All right, Kat.
Oh, hold on a second.
All right. I'm going to I'm going to start up. Are you all set, Kathy?
No, hold on. Just quick.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm ready.
You got your lipsticks on?
We never have hair and makeup, do we?
No, we don't. We can't afford that right now.
All right.
That's the
Yes,
future.
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's see.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Feedback Friday. If you aren't on mute already, could you mute yourselves? And I just wanted to welcome you to Botanical Colors Feedback Friday. Today is episode 51. There are 50, count them, 50 other Feedback Fridays videos on YouTube, and you can binge watch them all, which will take you about a year. So Feedback Friday is our weekly show where we speak with dyers, artists, scientists, writers, activists, historians, growers, and scholars about, and anybody else, believe me, about our favorite topic, which is natural dyeing and color. And I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me is Amy Dufault, director of sustainability and communications. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to everybody. We are kind of inching towards getting out of this pandemic. Some of you are already fully vaccinated. Some of us are partially vaccinated. Whatever, we're getting there. And I want to send out a very huge thank you to everybody because we couldn't do this without you. And your support, your participation has really kept us going throughout a very, very difficult time. For a little housekeeping, Amy is our moderator and she's going to be monitoring the chat on the call. And that's where you'll post the questions after the presentation today. We're going to have everybody muted, but after that, we'll be able to open it up for questions. And then at the end of the session, we unmute for everybody to say hello. And don't forget that at the end of this presentation, we have something that's called Picture of the Week.
Week.
And we have Amy takes care of that part of it. And it's very interesting because there's some amazing people who put up beautiful pictures of naturally dyed items. And we get to meet that person and talk about that. Today, our guest is Jennifer Steverson. Jennifer is a multidisciplinary artist, independent scholar, and writer based in Austin, Texas. So her work looks at the agricultural and craft traditions of Black American culture, which is the heart of her practice. And what really struck me about Jennifer is, first of all, I don't know very much about African American history. So having her take on it and her perspective from the great state of Texas, and how her family during the Great Migration, which was around like the early 1900s all the way up through the middle of the 20th century, was the attempt to move out of a very segregated and racist South and move into other larger urban areas, or to other places where they could grow and farm and live their lives. So she's going to be speaking about the impact of the Great Migration on her family and how it informs her own art and storytelling. But before we get to Jennifer, I just want to congratulate Virginia A. Virginia was our winner of the $50 gift card, because we're celebrating 50 episodes of Feedback Friday. So congratulations, Virginia. I hope you enjoy spending something on botanical colors. Let's go ahead and seg into our presentation. Jennifer, I'd like to welcome you. Amy will be running the slideshow. Jennifer will be speaking, and welcome to Feedback Friday.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love botanical colors, and I first learned about botanical colors actually through an indigo workshop with Abu Bakar Fofana. And so that was a really wonderful experience. So thanks for having me. And then Amy, I can't see the presentation. Is that my view? Okay, perfect. Perfect. So yes, as Kathy mentioned, my engagement with craft and with indigo in particular is really something that I connect a lot to through my family. This picture is actually a picture of my great-grandparents sitting in the middle. My great-grandparents sitting in the middle, and my great-grandmother with her siblings. They are the Hendersons, and they moved actually from Georgia to Texas shortly after the Reconstruction period. And this photo was taken around the 1900s in Texas, where they had farmland. And so my great-great-grandfather, who's in the center of the picture, he actually was from Savannah, Georgia. And so I've always been really interested in indigo, partially because of a film called Daughters of the Dust. Amy, if you can go to the next slide. Great. So Daughters of the Dust was a really groundbreaking film that was made in the early 1990s by Julie Dash. This film is really remarkable because it's really a historic portrait and a love letter to a Gullah Geechee family that is in a transition period where some of the family elders are choosing to stay in the Sea Islands, and then some of the younger generation are choosing to move up and out of the South to the North for more economic opportunities. And there are some really magical scenes in this film that really talk about the different bridges and cultural continuations of spiritual practices between Africa and America. And there's also a scene in the film, which was actually my first introduction to indigo, which is in this film, it's shown as a flashback to the period of enslavement, where the women are working with indigo in these giant vats outside. And seeing that film as a child, that was really my first glimpse of indigo. When I started working with indigo, I really was very drawn to Nigerian indigo practices, and a lot of my early work, as you can see in this picture of cloth, I was really trying to learn about the patterns and some of the resist dyeing techniques that I was reading about and seeing used in Nigeria. And it still is a big dream of mine to go to West Africa to see traditional indigo practices. And I think indigo is a really fascinating plant because it's something that is found in different forms in Asia, in Africa, and even in the Americas. So next slide, please. And so this is again, like an early piece that I made. This is a petite resist. And I was really drawn to kind of this fish scale pattern. And this was actually part of a commission, one of my first commissions that I made as an artist for somebody. And so again, I was really trying to explore some of the traditional adire patterns that I was seeing in Nigerian indigo, and then working with the materials that I had access to in Texas. And in my early indigo practice, I was really obsessed with trying to get as dark of a blue as possible. Now I have a greater appreciation for the full range of blues that are produced by the plants. Next slide, please. And so in addition to working with in addition to being inspired by traditional African craft practices, I also draw very much from African American culture, and the crossroads is a recurring pattern in my work. The crossroads are a kind of geographical and spiritual place of negotiation and exchange within Black Southern culture and within hoodoo and a lot of traditional spiritual practices that exist still in the American South for Black Americans. And the crossroads is a really enduring symbol for me because it's something that appears in blues music. It appears in, you know, when I read through the WPA interviews that were done with formerly enslaved people, the interviews that touch on spiritual practices, the crossroads is something that just appears kind of again and again. And I really keep coming back to the crossroads because it's a pattern that is very soothing for me to make. And so in this piece on the left, I've used multiple different materials, including indigo, indigo resist dyed fabric, glass beads, metal beads, and also iris leaves that I used to make cordage that I incorporated into the pattern at the top. And so that's one of my favorite pieces. And it's one that I keep coming back to. I've been working on that piece since 2018. And so it's one that I think I'm almost ready to finish. But working on the crossroads, it feels like a very meditative practice to me. And then you can see in the slide on the lower right-hand side for me, I also incorporate the crossroads into my block prints on indigo cloth. Next slide, please. And so this slide, these are also indigo pieces that I've made. So for all of you who work with natural dyes, I'm sure you all have like a scrap bin or a test strip bin. And so I have, really like a whole container full of remnant fabrics from my dyeing practice over the years. And this year at the start of actually right before the pandemic, I was part of the Texas Folklife Apprenticeship Program, and I learned traditional, modern, and art quilting techniques from an African-American quilter named Thomasita Louvier-Lignons in Austin. And so I worked with her right before the pandemic and then throughout the pandemic to learn these techniques. And so it really gave me an opportunity to dig into my scrap bin and find a new life for some of the fabrics that I've been collecting. And so this is a really beautiful opportunity for me to use some of those lighter indigo pieces that I have and to arrange them into different patterns. And I've been working with some traditional like blocks using half square triangles, and then also working with more improvised strip quilting patterns. So this is more of my recent work. Next slide, please. And this is one of the last markets that I was selling my fabric at. Within Austin, there's a really vibrant community of artists and artist markets. And so this was my booth that I set up during the East Austin studio tour, where I was selling my indigo and my block prints. And so I haven't done much vending lately, but it's something I'm looking forward to returning to. And so I sell, at this particular booth, I was selling cotton bandanas, 100% silk scarves, and then also kind of napkin sets that I had made, and then also block printed fabrics. So this is, I always love just seeing like piles of indigo on tables. So that's one of my favorite pictures that shows some of my work. Next slide, please. And then kind of to move backwards into another aspect that's really central to my work. As you can probably tell, I really love history. And so one of the projects that I've been working on continuously is a research project that incorporates more print techniques, but this is my Holding Ground project. And so when I first moved to Austin, I moved here for graduate school, and I felt really, I don't know, I have kind of an odd relationship with Texas because I grew up in California. My grandmother grew up in Texas. And so I'm part of a generation, a whole group of people who are basically reverse migrants. We're moving back to the South because it's more affordable and because there are job opportunities. And so this Holding Ground project is really a way for me to document some of the historic Black communities that have existed in Austin. And on a more personal level, it's also turned into a way for me to kind of place myself in the city and feel more connected to the place that I'm living now. So this is a map of Austin from about 1904. And I have highlighted in yellow Wheatville, which is a historic freedmen settlement that was founded in 1869 in West Austin. Something about the geography of Austin is that it's very segregated. Austin is notorious for having the first legally enshrined segregated city plan. The 1928 city plan designated a Negro district in East Austin, which is east of I-35, what used to be East Avenue. But historically, a lot of the free Black communities in Austin actually existed in West Austin and in other areas and along creek beds. And if you look at kind of the top right-hand segment, you can see this kind of bluff along the edge of the city. That is actually Shoal Creek, which still exists in Austin, but it's very much an urbanized waterway. And Wheatville was a settlement that existed in that area. I highlighted in red Hyde Park because Hyde Park is another historic community that still exists and is a landmarked community, but Hyde Park was built as a whites only suburb of the city. And so this map is really looking at a contrast of what things get preserved, what things get remembered in the landscape. Next slide, please. And so here are some images of what Shoal Creek looks like today. One of the things that I did for the Holding Ground project, after I started making some creative edits on the historical map to place Black communities back in the landscape, one of the things that I did was I walked through Pease Park, which is a linear park that runs along Shoal Creek. Pease Park is also named after an early political leader of Austin who was a plantation owner. And so part of the park is actually the old plantation grounds. And so again, this project is really about what does the city remember in its landscape? We don't have historical markers for the community of Wheatville, but we have an entire park that's named after an enslaver who rose to political power and continued to have a very dominant economic influence on the city. But I really wanted to try and focus as much as I could on the landscape to try and connect with the things that still existed that would have been present in the town of Wheatville. The image on on my left is a historic image that I found in the Austin History Center. And this is an image of a woman named Mrs. Johnson. And so what I did with this image is I used a risograph machine to do collage effects. And so I overlaid a copy of the historic image with pecan leaves. And I placed the pecan leaves directly on the risograph to try and really connect the person with the landscape that they might have walked through. And pecan trees are also really special because they're trees that are native to this part of Texas. So you find them everywhere in the landscape along with live oaks. And so I really wanted to, again, just draw that connection between the people and the land. Next slide, please. And I'll go through these ones really quickly, but part of the Holding Ground project, probably the process I spent the most time on was doing historical research. And so within 1900s Texas, you had a really dynamic network of African-American associations, especially of schools. There was a lot of advocacy happening on the part of African-American schools. And so on one side of the screen, I have kind of notes and minutes, a publication that was documenting a gathering of colored teachers from around the state of Texas. The man on the top was a principal of the West Austin School, which was an African-American school. And then the picture on the bottom is a picture of Maud Eason, who was an African-American woman who was listed in the census as mulatto, and she was the teacher of the Wheatville School. In this picture dates from about 1914. Next slide, please. And this is that entire picture. So this is a picture of Black children with their teacher at a school in West Austin. And so again, this is something that really runs counter to the narrative that is often told about Austin, which is that the history of Black Austin is in East Austin. And there are a lot of really great projects that I encourage people to check out. There's a film being made on the freedom settlements in Austin by a local filmmaker. And then there are also historians who are doing really dynamic work to document this history. Next slide, please. And so these are more risographs from my Holding Ground series. And so the image of the man leaning on the chair is also from the Austin History Center. And so I went through their collection and I licensed images that really called to me and started working with them. This image is called Hi John. Hi John the Conqueror is a medicinal herb that's very important within Black American Southern culture. It's an herb that lends strength and resilience. And the Hi John figure in folklore is kind of this person who's able to really kind of mock like authority and survive through like kind of tenacity, but also through humor. And so that figure really calls to me during this time because it still is such a challenging time in this country for Black folks. And I overlaid images of the Hi John flower along with knives from basically these are the shiny elements are clips from a picture that I took in the British Museum when I was in London, and they're African throwing knives. And the image of the woman is an image that I call We Wear Our Medicine. And so this is another historic image where I, put onto the risograph machine a copy of the archival image and then overlaid medicinal herbs from my garden as a way to just really also look at, not just how people survived, but how they were able to really care for themselves during challenging times. And the next part of the Holding Ground series that I'm going to make will be a quilt that is based on the map of the settlement. Next slide, please. And then this is just getting into some of the quilting and the embroidery work that I do. I have an improv quilt on this screen and then a small embroidered piece that incorporates more of the cordage that I've made. And that was actually dyed with hibiscus, the embroidered piece. Next slide, please. This is a quilt. This is the last quilt that I finished. I'm really proud of this one. I made this for an exhibition that was organized by my quilting teacher, Thomasita. And the quilting show was dedicated to African-American suffragettes. And African-American suffrage is, an ongoing issue, really. But I really chose to highlight Fannie Lou Hamer, who's somebody who I really admire. She was a SNCC civil rights organizer in Mississippi, and she also founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative. One of the repercussions of her activism work is that she was evicted from the farm where she was a sharecropper. And so she started Freedom Farm Cooperative as a place where civil rights, where Black people could be financially independent. And she really saw a strong link between land ownership and cooperative work and political sovereignty. And so she's someone who I really admire. This quilt is one that I think about a lot because currently in Texas, there is actually a bill that's being heard during the current legislative session seeking to restrict voting rights in the state of Texas. So this is still, when I think about African-American suffragettes, this is really an ongoing issue. One of the other quilts in the exhibit was dedicated to Stacey Abrams. Next slide, please. And so, let me see, how are we doing on time? Okay, good, doing well. So, and then to get into some of my newer work, which again is really like, I'm really excited to be able to bring together the quilting with the indigo. So all of these blocks that you can see were created with indigo fabric that I dyed. The majority of it is cotton, some of it is fabric that I bought from a creative reuse store. So some of it is probably like polyester blend, but I've just been working to pull colors together. Next slide, please. And I call this project Blue Call-in Response because this is a project that is collaborative. So I'm working with a musician who's creating musical elements and with a photographer. And so this image that you see is not the finished project. This is an in-progress piece. And then I have some examples here of other indigo work that I've done, a resist dyed piece that I call my fawn print, because it reminds me of, a baby deer with those patterns of light and dark. And then the other block that I have here is based on the G's Bend quilters. So I'm working with the house top pattern that is really prevalent in their work. Next slide, please. And so these are cyanotypes. So there's one cyanotype here. This is a cyanotype of a burlesque dancer. And I collaged in elements of basically images from NASA. So I'm really looking to kind of bring together like future kind of science science fiction type elements with historic images. And so the images that are in black and white are negatives that I'm going to be using to create cyanotypes. And the image of the woman on top, that's actually an image of Zora Neale Hurston in Florida during her field work. And she's another person whose work really inspires me. And so, yeah, this is kind of the next step. In my quilting, I've been experimenting for the past few months with different ways to transfer images to fabric. And I love cyanotypes because they're blue, so they bring that in, but they also allow me to work with images in a very highly detailed way. Like it's a pretty direct transfer process. And I can also easily kind of amp up or amp down aspects of the image that I want. I deliberately chose to work with this image of a burlesque dancer in a jazz club in Pittsburgh, because I really wanted to work with joyful images of African Americans at rest, at play. That feels like a really important part of my practice right now. Next slide, please. The other project that I'm working on right now that I'm super excited about, I'm calling Benin Bronzes. And this is a series that's going to incorporate family images with elements of African art that I photographed in the British Museum the last time I was in London. And to me, there is like a kind of, a little bit of there's a symmetry between overlaying images of my family who were, we're descendants of forced migration and human trafficking. So to create a parallel between those images of us with images of art that's been displaced from Africa is something that is really powerful to me. So the image, the collage that you see is an image of my grandmother's siblings in Herne, which is the town where they grew up, with an image of a wooden door that was taken from Nigeria to England. And then I'm also using some images I have of my grandmother's recipes and her biscuit. This is her spirited biscuit recipe in her handwriting. And then you can see images of the actual Benin bronzes, which are located, a lot of them are in the British Museum. There are also some in Germany and some in France. And there's a lot of energy right now around trying to get these museums to return some of this artwork to the places where the art was looted from. Next slide, please. And these are just more historical images that I love, things that I kind of have on my back burner that I'm hoping to bring into my artwork. You have an image of Zora Neale Hurston again in this collection of slides. An image of African-American performers doing the cakewalk. And then the image on the bottom of two people dancing is actually footage that was shot by Catherine Dunham, who's a really renowned, she was a really renowned scholar, anthropologist, I believe, or ethnographer of African-American descent. And she was also a choreographer. So her way of documenting dances was to actually create dances based on traditional movement that she saw in the Caribbean. And I think this film footage was taken in Jamaica. So yeah, these are some things I'm looking forward to working with next. Next slide, please. All right, and that's the end of my presentation. So you can see more of my work on my website, genevagene.com. And you can also see my work on Instagram. I currently have a limited edition run of prints of risographs from the Holding Ground series. And so definitely keep checking my website if that's work that you're interested in. And yeah, thank you so much for having me again.
Jennifer, thank you. That was amazing. And what she didn't mention is that there's also a donation button on her shopping page. So check that out. And I think that Jennifer really deserves our support in terms of the kind of super thoughtful, historical aesthetic work that she's doing, where she's looking at all of these different inputs into her expression of creativity. And there's a story behind every single thread. I really love that. So Jennifer, thank you. Thank you. That's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Amy has opened up chat for questions. So please ask away.
Okay, I can see some of them. Is it
Jennifer,
okay
I'm
if I
gonna
start
ask you
answering?
them, so you don't even have to look at them. Block it from your
Okay.
eyes.
All
Block
right, I'll cover my eyes.
it. Okay, so we're gonna kick it off with, can you say more about the crossroad pattern that you use?
Yes. So crossroads are, like I was saying, they're really places of negotiation and exchange between kind of, if you think about the spiritual realm and the human realm, crossroads are places where those things connect. So the idea of two roads crossing together has a lot of spiritual significance. And I talk about this more in on my website there's a crossroads section of my portfolio. The crossroads also have a very close connection to the Kikongo spiritual tradition. I'm forgetting. Oh man, the Congo cosmogram is what archaeologists call the crossroads. But you see evidence of crossroads in archaeological digs that have occurred in Black settlements in the US. So it's a really strong recurring symbol.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, can you tell us more about what is, oh my gosh, I've heard you say it a whole bunch of times, risograph.
Yes, risograph. So a risograph is a printing technique. So I almost like to think of it as like a digital screen print. So a risograph machine uses, the dyes are, I don't want to say that they're plant-based pigments, but they're dyes that have a transparency to them. And so what the machine does is when you scan an image, the risograph machine will cut almost a stencil out of rice paper and use that as the basis for the print. And so you can create multiple stencils and kind of start layering images. And I was able to create those through a residency, a one-day residency at the Facebook offices here in Austin. So I love that process. Really looking forward to doing more risograph prints.
A couple of people have asked about the movie that you mentioned, Daughter of.
Oh, Daughters of the Dust. Please watch it. It is beautiful. It is amazing. I love Julie Dash. She's a really important filmmaker. Daughters of the Dust was the first film by an African-American woman that received national distribution. So it's a really beautiful, very evocative work.
Yeah, and thanks to Melanie, who's here too. Hey, Melanie, about the Black farmers mentioned, like Fannie Lou Hamer with these, she was talking about the Freedom Farmers.
Yes.
White, and more recently,
yes,
there's Harvest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Freedom Farmers by Monica White is an incredible book. There's also another book, I cannot remember the author's name, but there's a book called Freedom Colonies that is specifically about Black freedom settlements in Texas. The reason they're called colonies is because some of the settlements, they were designed so that you could drive through them and not really know that you were going through a town. And partially that was done for safety reasons. But there's also another scholar whose work I really want to shout out, Dr. Andrea Roberts. She's based at Texas A&M, and she has a digital cartography project called the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, where she's using crowdsourced data to collect information about the Black freedom settlements in Texas. And I've added a few images that I found, like about the schools, to that map, but it's a really fantastic project.
Awesome. I will find it and put it in the video post. I just wrote the books down too. So how did you start block printing?
Block printing is something that I'm like, it's kind of like shout out to my third grade teacher. I had this amazing third grade teacher who had us do block printing, like, we were like carving linograph prints in the third grade. And so that was the first time I did that process. And then kind of over the years, it's something I just keep coming back to. So the block prints that I make are, yeah, they're lino cuts. And then I also took, I did take a class on wood block printing, like a really basic class. So that's something that I kind of want to get back to as well.
Lots of people just saying they love your presentation. Do you teach classes?
Yes, I do. I do teach classes. Most of the classes, all of the classes that I have taught have been in person. And so I'm still working on how to transition that to like a digital, set of practices. But the classes that I've taught most recently, I did a block printing class. I've also done a meditative embroidery class. Because that's something I really love. The whole like slow stitch movement really calls to me. And then I've also done some indigo classes. I will be teaching, I guess I should mention this, there's gonna be a camp called Everybody Camps in Austin. And I'll be teaching a natural dye workshop there, probably using like, doing some eco printing.
That sounds amazing. I would like to go to that camp. Can I ask a question? I wasn't sure, you had mentioned, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. SNCC? What is SNCC? SNCC? Did you say the word?
SNCC,
Student
yes,
Nonviolent
SNCC.
Coordinating Committee.
Yes.
Say it again?
SNCC
What is
the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, yes. They were established by Ella Baker during the Civil Rights Movement. And so it's basically like when we see, there's actually a great documentary called Freedom Summer that PBS just put out. That's all about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The images that you see of the Civil Rights Movement where you have like, Black people and white people coming down from the North to the South to like live with Black Southerners and do voter registration and freedom schools. That was a whole arm of the, yes, and John Lewis, one of the most famous members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a very, very important chapter in American history. I highly recommend people read more into it. There's also a book called I've Got the Light of Freedom, which I really, really love. It's a huge book. I read it back to front. And it's an oral history of SNCC in Mississippi, which is where Fannie Lou Hamer was from.
All right.
Yeah.
This is going to be basically an entire film and book list. And we'll be set for the rest of our lives. Lots to learn, for sure. So Terry Powers asking, she's just looking forward to seeing what's in the future. I assume you are on social media, your website.
Yes.
Just talk about your next project.
Yeah, so right now I'm doing a lot of work with digital archives because I can't get to my beloved in-person archives. And so right now the two projects that I mentioned, Blue Call-in Response, which is the collaborative project. That's something I'm working on. The cyanotypes that I'm creating are part of the Blue Call-in Response series. I'm gonna start contacting galleries and trying to find a space to show that work. And then I'm also working on the Benin Bronzes series, which is pulling in more of my family history. And beyond that, I am also a visiting researcher at the John L. Warfield Center for African American Studies at UT. And so I'm continuing to do research into African American textiles and specifically looking at, I'm really interested in natural dyes And I've read some really fascinating things about the use of naturally dyed cloth and quilting after the end of enslavement. So yeah. I guess the other thing I'll mention, this one is not open to the public, but I am going to be doing a visit. I'll be doing a virtual presentation to the Black Botany Studio at UC Santa Cruz through to a class that's being organized.
That's where I
Yes,
am a banana slug.
All right, did you go there?
I did.
Oh, nice. Yes. So yeah, there's a really great scholar there, Dr. Naya Rivera, and I'm going to be doing a presentation to her class. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Looks like Kathy's really excited about that too.
That one is going to be specifically about archives. I'm excited because I'm going to get to really geek out about archives.
That's awesome.
Cool. So
yeah.
cool. Can I ask a quick archive question? Like, have you looked at archives from other institutions outside of Texas?
Yes.
And so how does what they're collecting and their focus, how does that compare? Are you finding that?
So, I mean, so Austin is the capital of the state of Texas. And so there are a lot of archives here. The Austin History Center is a really wonderful archive, but I think there's a lot in Austin because it's the capital, but I'm also starting to look into I'm basically trying to find more about Hearne, Texas, where my family is from. So there are archives in every city, and I would say anybody who's interested in doing research or looking into things, start with your local historical societies, and you will be surprised at how much you can probably find. There are things like city directories, there are Sanborn insurance maps. There are also, for people who just want to kind of take a little shallow dive into archives, the Library of Congress is amazing. They have a massive amount of digitized content online. I've also been looking into the Schonberg archives online. Fingers crossed I will get there in person soon. But I'm also really interested in going to other countries to look into their archives, especially in the Caribbean, trying to find more traces of indigo. Because I keep getting hints of indigo after the period of enslavement as something that was used by Black people. So I really want to learn more about that.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
So are you growing your own indigo? Somebody's asking.
I am, yes, I am using the seeds that were collected by Madam. They're in botanical colors. Yes, Madam Magar. Yeah. I'm growing seeds, that variety from the Madam Magyar. So yeah, I'm excited to try and. Right now, I just want to start producing my own seeds so that I can have more plants. But I'm really interested in using those seeds because they were collected in the Gullah Geechee Islands.
This is a cool question. So lovely work. I think I saw in the piece with Fannie Lou Hamer that you use the courthouse steps quilting pattern. Do you also incorporate traditional Underground Railroad patterns in your work?
I haven't incorporated any of the Underground Railroad patterns, but I think I want to pull in the flying geese pattern, which is a specific block, quilting block that I've seen used in Underground Railroad quilts. So I want to pull that one in. What was the other part of the question? Oh, the Fannie Lou Hamer quilt, I actually was using the housetop pattern from the G's Bend quilters. So having the central block that kind of steps out from itself, that's something that was really inspired by the G's Bend quilts.
Where do you get access to a risograph machine?
That is a great question. I had access. I had access because I did that residency at the Facebook offices in Austin, and they have a risograph machine in their what do they call it? They have like a creative lab where I was teaching workshops, and then I was invited to do a one-day residency. I would encourage you to check with if you have any local like artistic co-working spaces. I'm starting to see risograph machines pop up more in Austin. Like I know there's one at St. Edward's. They used to hold workshops, but I've also seen some just again like creative co-working spaces that rent out space to artists to use specialized equipment. There are some that are starting to add risograph machines. Yeah.
Great. Let's see. Hi, Hope Leeson. Can you talk about what you can gather in terms of I almost said democracy, demography from the, and I think is it sandburn? Because I don't think it's a sunburn.
It's a sandburn, yeah. Okay, so the way that I use Sanborn maps is really interesting because Sanborn maps are insurance maps that were created to document valuable property. I use Sanborn maps to I basically am looking at the blank spaces on Sanborn maps because then I can usually identify where the communities of color are. Sometimes, often communities of color are not documented on a Sanborn map, but you can kind of look at it and say, hey, that whole 20 block area is missing. Let me look there for who was living in that area. So a lot of the way that I work with archives is kind of similar to collage. I might be looking at a Sanborn map and a city directory, and I also might be looking at a census records. Not census records actually, but I would probably match a Sanborn map with a city map of the same time period, and then try and find out who is living in the areas that are undervalued on the Sanborn map.
Okay. Do you have any plans to share your research with Dr. Tiffany Momans, BCDA, Black Craftspeople Digital Archive?
I'm writing her name down. I'm not familiar with her work, but I would love to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say her name again?
It's Dr. Tiffany Momon, Momon, and then BCDA, Black Craftspeople Digital Archive.
I'll definitely look into their work. I feel like I think that's an account that I follow on Instagram. But yeah, I think the other group that I'm really inspired by is Electric Marinage, which is a group that really looks at so many, I can't even sum it up, but their work is really excellent. So I'm hoping I'll be reaching out to them, but I'll definitely add her, Dr. Monan, to my list.
Mm-hmm. So Suzanne was asking, did you say that the Hyde Park area is still for whites only? Or did I imagine this? But I had written down too, the different communities that you have on that map.
Yeah.
Is it still all, because you were saying how.
No, Hyde Park is no longer, Hyde Park is an affluent neighborhood in Austin. It is not racially segregated. It's now part of the city of Austin. But when Hyde Park was founded back in the 1900s, it was built, and there are suburbs like this all over the country. There's been a lot of research on Levittown in New York. A lot of suburban communities were built with what they call restrictive covenants. So if you have a historic house in a formerly segregated area, if you look at the deed, you might see language that says you can't sell this house to a person of color. So it was built to be a whites only suburb, but it is not a whites only suburb today. And
you had also mentioned about, there was some river or something, people being put on pedestals that shouldn't be really put on pedestals that were plantation owners say. Is there any pushback in the city on that, with taking down statues or kind of renaming neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been in Austin since 2011, and I remember being part of the group of people who was asking the University of Texas at Austin to remove Confederate statues from campus in 2015 after the Charleston massacre. At that time, the university decided not to remove all of the statues because of recent events that happened in Virginia. They have since taken down more of the Confederate monuments that are on campus. And there is a movement within the city of Austin to rename high schools and rename streets so that there are not as many monuments specifically to Confederates.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a movement. I think like in a lot of places in the United States, it's a movement that feels long overdue, but it is something that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one thing I just want to add, as a historian, it's not enough to take down monuments, because there are still places and people who are invisible in the city. And when I say invisible, it's not just about creating a negative space. It's like, how do you tell the stories that have not been told? Outside of renaming streets and things like that, where are the monuments to the people who, if you're walking through a city, you have no idea that they lived there?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the other part of the conversation that really needs to happen.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. That was
so amazing.
so,
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's a lot to take in, a lot of, I mean,
Beautiful, just a
yeah,
beautiful
there's so
narrative.
much we all need to be educating ourselves on about the places that we live and digging deep. I mean, I've got so many notes myself here just about where to start with
Right.
historical societies and kind of
I
digging
mean,
into that information that you want locally.
this
Yeah.
concept of holding ground, I mean, we are all on the ground of other people. Right? We are all on the ground of other people.
Yeah.
So having that awareness and honoring that is really critical for us to be able to kind of see our small world, our large world, and our interconnected world all together. Thank you.
And that's definitely an aspect of holding ground, that it's like, that's kind of why I frame it in that way, because to me, it's not about owning the land. It's like being the descendant of displaced people on stolen land. Like, what does that mean for me in terms of having a relationship
exactly
with the ecosystem?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. Very amazing. Thank you again. That was just incredible. So there's going to be a post with the video link, as well as just tons and tons of resources. I would just like to add there, any of you who are involved in the preservation of voting rights, as Fannie Lou Hamer was so critical in, and that people who were working in the SNCC during the civil rights, we are at another moment in our history where voting rights are being severely suppressed among communities to impact disproportionately communities of color and people where voting is very difficult. So if you are in a state where that is happening, I encourage you and invite you to raise your voice and let your wishes be known, that the health of a good democracy, of a thriving democracy, is the ability to have your vote be counted and to be able to vote. So just, the fight is not even over. We are just starting.
Yes.
All right. Enough about that. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing next week, Jennifer. And don't forget to donate to Jennifer. Next week, couple things. So Natalie Stopka, who was a presenter a few weeks ago, she has a lake pigment class that we're sponsoring on May 1st. And so we invite you to check that out as well. I am actually going to be getting on a plane for the first time in 18 months, and I'll be headed to Sewanee, Tennessee to teach at Shake Rag. And that is June 13th through 19th, I believe. I think they still have openings in the workshop. So if you're interested, I'll be doing surface techniques using natural dyes. It's basically 5 full days of just having fun. Our first big workshop after being locked down for a bit. And we also still have openings in Abu Bakr Fofana's Indigo and Stitch Resist workshops. Please join us there if you are interested. And next week, we have artist, natural dyer, and writer Katrina. What? Thank you, Kathy.
What? Oh,
Wait,
no.
are you doing this for me?
Reese Honeycutt is underneath me, so I was just, she's
Oh,
holding the book. It's like the Brady Bunch.
oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay. Katrina Rodabaugh is going to be joining us, and she's launching her 3rd book, Make Thrift Mend. We'll have copies here. We have copies here. They'll be on sale on the 21st. Her other book, Mending Matters, is also in stock. So Katrina is just like, she has this pair of pants that she's mended like 30 times. And I'm actually wearing a pair of pants that need to go in for their 3rd round of mending, but she just has this philosophy about taking what you have and making it yours through mending, care, over dyeing, embellishment, all sorts of things. And so that's what her book's about. And we hope you will join us for that exciting presentation. And the last thing we have on our agenda is, of course, picture of the week.
Week. Oh,
Take
and
it away, Amy.
I already see you, Diane. I already see you. So hold on, let me share the screen for the 3rd time. I'm really showing off of my screen sharing skills today. Well, wow. So everybody was really into, hold on, where are you, Diane? You got to unmute yourself. I can't see you.
I am here.
Thank you, Diane. And you look beautiful today. So yeah, last week with Cara Marie Piazza's ice dyeing, it seemed to make everybody go crazy buying new or just using what they had on hand to start making ice cubes full of extracts and plants. So I saw lots of those over the past week, but I loved what Diane had. I thought there were lots of, I thought maybe you were making Reese's peanut butter cups or something. You're making some peanut butter cups, but no, you were making ice cubes. So why don't you talk about what we have here, and I'll scroll through some of your pictures.
Oh, yes. Well, Cara Maria was just so full of joy in the way she was talking about the ice dyeing. I started actually exploring, but dyeing and color, for me, this was a pretty new world. And it was really Breeze Honeycutt in her first Feedback Friday that made me think, I can do this. And thinking now, she also had some frozen things. But it's been for me kind of a way to mark this time. I'm really just kind of working out of my pockets with textiles that I have. I've always been a collector of things, and so I have a bunch of textiles around, and then things that were growing in my garden, and then over this winter period, then doing things that had to do with the acorn galls and just the different things that I could find around. So some of it was the idea of limiting myself to just what I've got in my pockets and having that create this kind of narrative of this strange period. I'm in Florence, Italy, just outside of Florence in the countryside. So I had my own my own pomegranates, which I used in some of these dyes. And the last thing that I did here, I had the idea to use the onion skin dye that I had when she was talking about freezing things. I thought, that's what I can do with it. So some of them have the pansies that I have growing in the garden now, the ranunculus. And then I've been doing another project with coins that I've collected kind of in travels over the years, the coins that kind of remain in your bag at the end of a trip to a foreign country, and been doing a whole series of experiments of that reacting to tannins. So some of them went into this dye as well. So there's it's just something that it was so kind of easy and joyful in a certain way. I have some new ones that I just, do you have the next thing that I posted after that?
Let me,
because after the delight of what this did.
Can you see this, like your whole page right now, Diane?
Yes.
Okay, sometimes it disappears, but this one right here? Or this one?
This is process, and then the last one was result.
That's beautiful.
So here I tried actually brewing some tea and freezing the flowers in the tea. And then got all of these really beautiful blues. And I have no idea if these are totally fugitive, but kind of like the moment of rinsing the flowers off and looking at it, it's just such a delight that's okay with me.
Oh, is this like a little,
yeah.
You just made a little film?
It's a little video.
Look at you, Diane. Look at you.
It was hanging on my clothesline. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's really great. I cannot wait to try out the ice dyeing. I'm just, like I said, between you and lots of other folks that had, been posting about the ice dyeing, it was just so inspiring. But one thing I do want to say, and Kathy agrees with me on this, you've been with us since the beginning. You've been here really for most of the Feedback Friday episodes, and it's been so much fun to see all the inspiration that you get and that you actually like put into action after every Feedback Friday. Suddenly there's something that Diane's doing, from inspiration, which has been a lot of fun. So thank you.
This for me has been such a wonderful community to be able to connect to like this once a week. And I really appreciate seeing what everybody else is doing, and all of the presenters who have been so generous in sharing what it is that's interesting to them. And so nice to have a community of people who are really listening and excited to hear it. So, so I've got more space in my freezer. I'm worried about somebody asking me just what it is that I have in the freezer. So far, it hasn't been noticed. I'm trying to get it in and out as quick as I can.
Yeah. Well, here's Diane's Instagram page. So at Diane Becker. So follow Diane and all the cool things that she's doing with natural dyes. And, I know when we talked really quickly last night, there you are. And Diane was showing me all the work that was on her couch behind her, which was hilarious to see how epic her work has become. While stuck in Florence. I mean, it doesn't seem so bad to be stuck in Florence, Italy, but you're really maximizing your time stuck inside, and we love you for that.
Well, it's been, I have always traveled a lot for the work that I do. I kind of connected to this through the work I do with tannins and tanning veg tan leather. That's more my field of expertise. And I thought at first that, botanical colors, botanical dyeing, natural dyeing on leather. My very first experiments, I was doing paper, cloth, leather. But I found that paper and cloth were much more receptive to botanical printing or the other experiment. The leather needs a little bit more work, and these materials seem so much easier and more accessible, and kind of not requiring the kind of planning that probably someone that Kathy would be really good at knowing how to get results, where I'm a little more just improvising and discovering.
You're doing a great job.
So beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, ladies.
Let's all unmute and say hello. Thank you, Diane. That was amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. That was so amazing.
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
lovely,
Thank
lovely.
you.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Looking
much.
forward to checking out your Instagram, Diane.
Yeah, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Jennifer.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And
Bye.
so interesting to
Bye.
hear.
Inspiration.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Avenel.
Hello, Jen.
Thanks,
So nice
Jennifer.
to see you.
Good to
Yay.
see you.
Oh, you are. Hey.
Amy, I'm going to make you host. Do you want me
Okay.
to stop the recording or do you want to keep it going?
Oh, no, you don't want to record what happens after this.
Okay, I'm stopping the recording.